The morning sun filtered through the dense canopy of pines, casting dappled shadows on the winding trail that snaked through the Blue Ridge Mountains. The air was crisp, carrying the sharp scent of evergreen and damp earth, with a faint chill that clung to the skin despite the promise of a warm July day. The forest hummed softly, wind rustling through leaves, the distant trill of a warbler, the crunch of gravel underfoot. For the four friends, Lila, Tessa, Harper, and Mia, it was the perfect escape, a weekend retreat to a secluded cabin nestled deep in these ancient hills, far from the grind of their city lives. Lila, the unofficial leader of the group at 29, had planned the trip with meticulous care. A graphic designer with a love for the outdoors, she'd spent weeks scouring rental sites for the perfect spot, a rustic A-frame cabin perched on a ridge overlooking a valley of rolling green. She'd sent the group chat a flurry of photos, wooden beams, a stone fireplace, a porch with a view that stretched for miles. "This is our reset," she texted, her enthusiasm infectious. Lila was the kind who thrived in nature, her auburn hair often tied back in a messy bun, her hazel eyes bright with the kind of restless energy that made her seem always on the verge of an adventure. She'd grown up hiking these mountains with her father, a park ranger who'd taught her to read a trail like a story, every bent twig or scuffed stone a clue to the world's quiet secrets. Tessa, 27, was the skeptic, a nurse with a sharp wit and a practical streak. She'd agreed to the trip only after Lila promised there'd be Wi-Fi and a fully stocked kitchen. Her dark curls bounced as she walked, her running shoes kicking up dust on the trail. She was the group's anchor, the one who remembered to pack first aid kits and extra batteries, though she'd roll her eyes at Lila's starry-eyed talk of finding herself in the woods. Still, Tessa loved the group's dynamic, the way their differences, Lila's dreaminess, Harper's intensity, Mia's quiet warmth, wove them together like threads in a tapestry. Harper, 30, was the wild card, a freelance photographer whose intensity could light up a room or burn it down. Her camera hung around her neck, a constant companion, capturing the world in stark contrasts of light and shadow. She'd been the first to say yes to the trip, drawn to the idea of shooting the mountains at dawn, the mist curling like smoke over the peaks. Her blonde hair was cropped short, her blue eyes sharp and searching, always looking for the next frame. Harper had a restless edge, a hunger for meaning that sometimes left her pacing at night, but out here, she seemed at ease, her lens trained on the way sunlight caught the dew on a fern. Mia, the youngest at 26, was the group's heart, a kindergarten teacher with a soft voice and a knack for listening. She had a way of making everyone feel seen. Her long black hair was braided down her back, and she wore a faded denim jacket, a gift from her older brother, who teased her about getting lost in the woods. Mia wasn't a hiker like Lila, but she loved the idea of the cabin, of cozy nights by the fire, of laughing over wine and card games. She brought a journal, hoping to sketch the wildflowers she'd seen on the drive up, their delicate petals a contrast to the rugged terrain. The four had been friends since college, their bond forged in late-night study sessions and road trips to nowhere. This weekend was meant to be a celebration, a break from the chaos of their late 20s, a chance to reconnect. They'd arrived at the cabin the night before, a bumpy drive up a gravel road that wound through the forest. The place was everything Lila had promised, a cozy retreat with creaking floorboards, a wood stove that warmed the open living area, and a porch where they'd sat with blankets and hot cocoa, watching the stars emerge. They'd laughed until their sides ached, retelling old stories, planning a hike for the next morning. Nothing too intense, Lila had promised, tracing a route on a topographic map spread across the coffee table. Just a loop to Ravens Point and back, for miles tops. That morning, they'd set out just after dawn, backpacks slung over their shoulders, filled with water, granola bars, and Harper's camera gear. Lila led the way, her map tucked into a waterproof sleeve, her boots steady on the uneven path. Tessa grumbled about the early start, but kept pace, while Harper stopped every few yards to snap photos, a twisted route, a shaft of light piercing the canopy. Mia trailed behind, pausing to touch the rough bark of a tree or point out a cluster of wild violets. The trail was well marked, a popular route for day hikers, though they'd seen no one else that morning. The forest felt like theirs alone, a private world of green and gold. They reached Raven's Point by 9 a.m., a rocky outcrop with a view that stole their breath. The valley sprawled below, a patchwork of pines and meadows, the distant peaks shrouded in haze. Harper set up her tripod, muttering about the perfect shot, while Tessa sprawled on a flat rock, sipping from her water bottle. Mia sat cross-legged, sketching in her journal, and Lila stood at the edge, hands on her hips, her face lit with quiet awe. "This is why I dragged you guys out here," she said, her voice carrying over the wind. "This is what matters." They lingered for an hour, eating snacks, trading stories, the kind of easy chatter that felt like home. Then Lila glanced at her watch. "We should head back. Storm's supposed to roll in this afternoon." The sky was still clear, but the forecast had warned of thunderstorms, and Lila was cautious. She knew how fast weather could turn in the mountains. They packed up, Harper reluctantly folding her tripod, and started the descent. The trail looped back a different way, narrower and less traveled, winding through denser forest. Lila took the lead again, her pace brisk, while Tessa teased her about being Captain Wilderness. Mia hummed softly, and Harper lagged behind, chasing one last photo. It was Tessa who first noticed something was off. They'd stopped at a stream to refill their bottles, the water cold and clear as glass. Lila was crouched by the bank, showing Mia how to use a portable filter. Tessa glanced around, frowning. "Where's Harper?" she called. The group froze, scanning the trail. Harper's backpack lay against a tree, her camera still hanging from its strap, but she was gone. "Harper!" Lila shouted, her voice echoing through the trees. No answer. The forest, so vibrant moments before, seemed to swallow the sound, leaving only the rush of the stream and the rustle of leaves. They called again, fanning out along the trail, checking behind boulders and thickets. Mia's voice trembled as she yelled Harper's name, her sketchbook forgotten on the ground. Tessa climbed a rise, hoping for a better view, while Lila checked the map, her hands shaking slightly. The trail was clear, no side paths for at least a mile. Harper couldn't have wandered far. She'd been right there, not 10 minutes ago. "Maybe she's taking a photo," Mia said, her voice thin with hope. But Harper's backpack, untouched, told a different story. It held her phone, her keys, her wallet, everything she'd need. The sight of it, abandoned, sent a chill through Lila's spine. They searched for an hour, shouting until their throats were raw, retracing their steps to Raven's Point and back. The sky was darkening now, clouds rolling in, the air heavy with the promise of rain. Tessa, ever practical, pulled out her phone, but there was no signal this deep in the mountains. "We need to get help," she said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. Lila nodded, her mind racing. They couldn't leave Harper's backpack. It was evidence, a marker of where she'd last been. But they couldn't stay either. The storm was coming, and night wasn't far off. The three women hurried back to the trailhead, a 2-mile trek that felt endless. Mia was crying softly, clutching her jacket as if it could anchor her. Tessa kept her arm around her, her own face pale but resolute. Lila led, her heart pounding, her mind replaying every moment of the morning. Had they missed something? A sound, a sign? When they reached the parking lot, their rental SUV was still there, next to Harper's beat-up hatchback. The sight of it, her car, waiting untouched, hit like a punch. Lila fumbled for her phone, finally finding a weak signal. She dialed 911, her voice breaking as she explained. Their friend was gone, vanished without a trace in the middle of a hike. Within an hour, the trailhead was buzzing with activity. Park rangers arrived first, their radios crackling, followed by local police and a search and rescue team. A ranger named Tom Bennett, a grizzled man with a weathered face, took charge, his calm demeanor a lifeline in the chaos. He questioned the women, his notepad filling with details. Harper's height, 5 feet 6 inches. Her clothing, a gray tank top, black leggings, hiking boots, her last known location. Tessa handed over Harper's backpack, her hands lingering on the straps as if letting go would make the loss real. The rangers marked the stream as the starting point, setting up a command post as volunteers trickled in, their faces grim but determined. The search began as the first raindrops fell, a light drizzle that promised to worsen. Lila, Tessa, and Mia stood huddled under a tarp, watching teams fan out with flashlights and maps. K-9 units barked in the distance, their handlers shouting commands. A helicopter buzzed overhead, its spotlight cutting through the gathering dusk. Lila's eyes kept drifting to the forest, its depths swallowing the light, its vastness a wall she couldn't breach. Harper was out there, alone, lost, or worse. The thought lodged in her chest, sharp and cold. Tessa gripped her hand, her voice low. "She's tough. She'll be okay." But the words felt hollow, drowned out by the rain and the endless, silent trees. As night fell, the search stretched on, the storm turning the trails to mud. The women were sent back to the cabin, told to wait for updates. They sat on the porch, wrapped in blankets, staring at the dark. Mia clutched Harper's camera, found in her backpack, its last photo a blurry shot of the stream, the water glinting like a warning. Lila's mind churned. Where could Harper have gone? Why hadn't they heard her? The mountains, so beautiful that morning, now loomed like a predator, hiding secrets in their shadows. The search would continue, the rangers promised, but as the rain pounded the roof, a terrible certainty settled in. Harper was gone, and the forest wasn't giving her back. The rain fell in sheets, turning the Blue Ridge Mountains into a slick, shadowed maze. By dawn, the trailhead where Harper had vanished was transformed into a hive of activity, a stark contrast to the serene wilderness that had drawn the four friends just a day before. The air was heavy with the scent of wet pine and churned mud, the forest's quiet hum drowned out by the crackle of radios, the bark of search dogs, and the thrum of a helicopter circling above. The storm had slowed overnight, but left the trails treacherous, each step a battle against the slick earth. For Lila, Tessa, and Mia, the world had narrowed to this muddy lot, where hope and dread wrestled in their chests as the search for Harper intensified. The command post was a cluster of tents near the trailhead, where Park Ranger Tom Bennett coordinated the effort with a quiet authority. His face, lined from years in these mountains, betrayed no panic, but his eyes flicked constantly to the maps spread across a folding table, topographic lines curling like veins across the paper. He'd called in every resource available, a search and rescue team from the county, a dozen volunteers from nearby towns, and a K-9 unit trained to track human scent. Lila stood at the edge of the tent, her hands stuffed into her jacket pockets, watching the teams move with purpose. Tessa paced nearby, her phone useless without signal, her frustration bubbling over. "They're moving too slow," she muttered, kicking a pebble into the mud. Mia sat on a camp chair, her eyes red from crying, clutching Harper's camera like a talisman. The search was methodical but daunting. The Blue Ridge stretched for miles, its dense forests and steep ravines a labyrinth even for seasoned rangers. Harper's last known location, the stream where her backpack was found, was marked with orange flags, a starting point for the grid search. The K-9 unit, led by a handler named Sarah with a German shepherd named Max, had picked up a faint scent near the stream, but the rain had washed away much of the trail. "She could have gone any direction," Sarah told Bennett, her voice clipped as she adjusted Max's harness. "The water's messing with his nose." Lila overheard, her stomach twisting. She knew these mountains, had hiked them since she was a kid, but their vastness now felt like a betrayal, hiding Harper in its folds. The volunteers were a mix of locals and hikers, their faces grim under rain ponchos. They fanned out in lines, shoulder to shoulder, sweeping the forest with flashlights and walking sticks, calling Harper's name. Their voices echoed, swallowed quickly by the trees. Drones buzzed overhead, their cameras scanning for any sign. A flash of gray fabric, a glint of metal, but the canopy was thick, blocking much of the view. Lila wanted to join them, to plunge into the woods and scream until Harper answered, but Bennett had been firm. "You stay here. Let us do our job." His tone was kind but unyielding, and Lila hated how helpless it made her feel. By midday, a lead emerged. A volunteer, a wiry man in his 50s named Carl, found a single shoelace snagged on a thorn bush about a half-mile from the stream. It was black, like the ones on Harper's hiking boots, and the sight of it sent a jolt through the command post. Lila's heart leapt. Proof Harper had been there. Proof she was close. Tessa grabbed Mia's hand, her voice tight with hope. "That's hers, right? It has to be." Mia nodded, but her face was pale, her eyes fixed on the muddy lace now sealed in an evidence bag. Bennett examined it, his brow furrowing. "Could be hers," he said carefully. "But these trails see a lot of hikers. We'll test it for DNA." The words were practical, but they deflated the moment, reminding everyone how little they had to go on. The shoelace galvanized the search. Teams redirected to the area, a steep slope thick with brambles and fallen logs. The helicopter swept lower, its rotor wash shaking the treetops. Lila watched the activity, her mind racing. Harper was meticulous about her gear. She'd never leave a lace untied, never let it snag without noticing. Had she been running? Tripped? The thought of Harper stumbling through the dark, alone, made Lila's chest ache. She replayed their last moments at the stream. Harper crouching to adjust her lens, muttering about the light on the water, her blonde hair catching the sun. Had Lila missed something? A shadow, a sound? She squeezed her eyes shut, willing the memory to sharpen, but it stayed maddeningly vague. Tessa, meanwhile, was grilling Sarah about the dogs. How far can they track in this rain? What if she's hurt, not moving? Sarah's answers were patient but blunt. The rain diluted sense, and the terrain was a nightmare. Caves, cliffs, streams that could swallow a trail. Tessa's jaw tightened, her nurse's instinct kicking in. If she's injured, she could be hypothermic by now. It was 40 degrees last night. Her voice cracked, and Mia reached for her, their hands locking together. The three women had barely slept, their night spent in the cabin, jumping at every creak, hoping for a knock that never came. The fireplace, so warm the night before, now felt like a mockery, its glow unable to touch the cold fear gripping them. By the second day, the search expanded. More volunteers arrived, including Harper's brother, Ethan, who drove 6 hours from Charlotte. He was a taller, quieter version of Harper, with the same sharp blue eyes, and his arrival broke something in Mia, who sobbed into his shoulder. Ethan's grief was raw but focused. He joined the volunteers, combing the trails with a desperation that mirrored Lila's own. The community response was overwhelming. Local businesses donated food, a church group set up a coffee station, and a social media campaign, with hashtag Find Harper spread like wildfire. Strangers posted flyers with Harper's photo, her smile frozen in a moment from last summer, her camera slung across her chest. Lila stared at the flyers, taped to lampposts and gas station windows, and felt a surge of guilt. She'd picked this place, this trail. Had she led them into danger? A second lead surfaced late that afternoon, raising pulses again. A hiker reported seeing a woman matching Harper's description near a fire road a mile from the stream, just after noon on the day she vanished. The witness, a retiree named Doris, described a woman in a gray tank top, walking quickly, looking distracted. But the timing didn't add up. Harper had been with the group at Ravens Point until at least 10 a.m., and the fire road was too far for her to have reached so soon. Bennett questioned Doris gently, but her story wavered under scrutiny. She wasn't sure of the time, couldn't recall the woman's hair color. The lead fizzled, leaving the team deflated. Tessa cursed under her breath, pacing again. How does someone just disappear like that? No scream, no trace. The investigators weren't idle. A detective from the county sheriff's office, Karen Ortiz, joined Bennett, bringing a forensic team to process Harper's backpack. Ortiz was in her 40s, with a no-nonsense demeanor and a notepad she flipped through constantly. She cataloged every item. Harper's phone dead, but intact. Her wallet, cash, and cards untouched. A granola bar, a water bottle, and her camera, its memory card holding that final, blurry photo of the stream. The forensic team swept the area for fingerprints, fibers, anything out of place, but the rain had erased much of the evidence. Ortiz's questions were sharp, probing the women's memories. Had Harper seemed off? Had they seen anyone else on the trail? Lila's answers felt inadequate. She hadn't noticed anything unusual, hadn't seen a soul. The emptiness of the trail, once a gift, now felt sinister. As the third day dawned, the search grew frantic. The rain had stopped, but fog blanketed the mountains, limiting visibility. The K-9 units lost the scent entirely, and the drones turned up nothing but endless green. Volunteers trudged through mud, their boots heavy, their faces etched with exhaustion. Ethan organized a group to check nearby caves, his voice hoarse from calling Harper's name. Lila joined him for a few hours, against Bennett's advice, her eyes scanning every shadow for a glimpse of gray fabric. The forest was relentless. Branches snagged her clothes, rocks tripped her feet, and the silence mocked her hope. She thought of her father's lessons. The woods always tell a story. But this story was blank, its pages torn out. Back at the command post, Tessa and Mia faced the media. A local news crew had arrived, their cameras intrusive, their questions relentless. "What was Harper like?" a reporter asked, thrusting a microphone at Mia. She froze, her voice catching. She saw beauty in everything, she managed, tears spilling over. Tessa stepped in, her tone fierce. "She's a fighter. She's out there, and we're going to find her." The clip aired that night, spreading Harper's story further, but it brought no new leads. Online, amateur sleuths were already speculating. Some claimed Harper had run off. Others spun wild theories about bears or abductions. Lila scrolled through the posts on her phone, her stomach churning at the cruelty of strangers. By the fifth day, the search was losing steam. Volunteers dwindled, called back to jobs and families. The helicopter was grounded, its fuel budget spent. Bennett and Ortiz met with the women, their faces heavy with the news Lila had dreaded. The active search was scaling back. "We're not giving up," Bennett said, his voice steady but tired. "We'll keep patrols out, follow any new tips. But we can't maintain this level of resources." Tessa's eyes flashed. "So you're just leaving her out there?" Ortiz met her gaze, unflinching. "We're doing everything we can with what we have. We need a break, something concrete." Lila felt the words like a physical weight, pressing her into the ground. That night, back at the cabin, the three women sat in silence. The fireplace was cold, the air thick with grief. Mia clutched Harper's camera, scrolling through its photos. The valley at dawn, a close-up of a spiderweb, Lila laughing at the trailhead. Each image was a stab, a reminder of the life interrupted. Tessa stared at the map on the table, its lines now mocking their failure. Lila stood on the porch, the mountains looming in the dark, their beauty turned cruel. Somewhere out there was Harper, or the truth of what had happened to her. The forest held it tight, and as the wind whispered through the pines, Lila felt the first seed of a terrible fear. They might never know. The Blue Ridge Mountains settled into a quiet rhythm as summer faded into autumn, then winter, their peaks dusted with snow that softened the trails where Harper had vanished. The frenzy of the search had dwindled to a faint pulse, the command post long dismantled. The orange flags marking the stream faded and tattered. For Lila, Tessa, and Mia, the world felt suspended, trapped in the moment Harper's backpack was found, its contents a haunting still life of her interrupted life. 3 months had passed since that July morning, then 6, then a year. The case was officially cold, a term that felt like a betrayal to Lila, as if the world had decided Harper could be forgotten. The forest, once a sanctuary, now loomed in her dreams, its shadows hiding answers she couldn't reach. Lila had stayed in the mountains longer than the others, renting a small apartment in the nearby town of Boone to be close to the investigation. Her graphic design work became sporadic, her focus consumed by the case. She visited the trailhead weekly, walking the path to the stream, searching for something the teams might have missed. A scrap of fabric, a scuff in the dirt. The locals knew her by sight, offering sympathetic nods or cups of coffee at the diner, but their pity stung. She kept Harper's flyer pinned to her fridge, the photo of her friend's sharp smile blurring from too many tears. Lila's father, now retired, called daily, urging her to come home, but she couldn't leave. Not while Harper was still out there, somewhere in the vastness of those hills. Tessa returned to her nursing job in Raleigh, throwing herself into 12-hour shifts to dull the ache. She was practical, always had been, but the lack of answers gnawed at her. She'd lie awake at night, replaying the hike, Harper's laugh, the glint of her camera, the moment she wasn't there. Tessa had taken to calling Detective Ortiz every week, her questions sharp and relentless. What about the shoelace? The DNA results? The Fire Road sighting, Ortiz was patient, her voice steady over the phone, but the updates were always the same. The shoelace had no usable DNA, degraded by rain. The fire road lead was a dead end. "We're still looking," Ortiz would say. But Tessa could hear the fatigue, the shift in tone that meant hope was slipping away. Mia, back in Durham, struggled most visibly. Teaching kindergarten felt impossible some days, the children's laughter a painful echo of Harper's. She'd taken up running, a habit borrowed from Lila, pounding the sidewalks as if she could outrun her grief. Mia started a blog, Finding Harper, where she posted updates, memories, and pleas for information. It became a rallying point for the group, a way to keep Harper's name alive. The blog drew hundreds of followers, strangers moved by the story of the photographer lost in the mountains. Mia poured her heart into it, sharing stories of Harper's kindness, how she'd once spent hours photographing a stranger's wedding for free, how she taught Mia to see the world through a lens. But the blog also attracted darker voices, online sleuths who spun theories about cults, serial killers, or Harper running off to start a new life. Mia read every comment, hoping for a clue, but found only noise. The community response had been fervent at first. Boone held candlelight vigils, the church overflowing with locals and hikers who'd never met Harper but felt her loss. Ethan, Harper's brother, organized a fundraiser to hire a private investigator, a grizzled ex-cop named Ray, who combed the trails for weeks but found nothing new. The hashtag Find Harper hashtag trended for months, flyers plastered across North Carolina, from gas stations to college campuses. But as the first anniversary approached, the momentum faded. The media moved on to new tragedies, and volunteers stopped calling. The mountains, indifferent, kept their secrets, their beauty a cruel mask over the void where Harper had been. Lila, Tessa, and Mia reunited at the cabin on the anniversary, a pilgrimage that felt both necessary and unbearable. The A-frame stood unchanged, its wooden beams creaking under a light July rain. They sat on the porch, sipping wine, the silence heavy with Harper's absence. Mia brought a photo album, its pages filled with snapshots from their college days. Harper mid-laugh, Harper with her camera, Harper asleep on a road trip, her head on Tessa's shoulder. "She'd hate us moping," Tessa said, her voice thick, but the attempt at levity fell flat. Lila traced the route to Raven's Point on her worn map, her fingers lingering on the stream. "I keep thinking we missed something," she whispered. "A sign. A sound." Mia reached for her hand, her eyes wet. "We did everything we could." The investigation wasn't entirely dormant. Ortiz kept the case file open, following up on occasional tips, a hiker's vague memory of a woman, a hunter's report of an odd campsite. None panned out. The forensic team had exhausted Harper's backpack, finding no fingerprints but her own, no clues in the camera's blurry final photo. Ranger Bennett patrolled the trails when he could, his eyes scanning for anything out of place, but he confided in Lila one day at the diner. "This place is too big. She could be anywhere." His honesty was a knife, cutting through the hope Lila clung to. She nodded, her coffee cold, and wondered if she'd ever feel whole again. 2 years after the disappearance, a flicker of hope emerged. A woman went missing in a neighboring county, a hiker named Claire, last seen on a trail 30 miles from Raven's Point. The similarities were eerie. Claire was 28, an avid photographer, her car found abandoned at a trailhead with her backpack nearby. The news sent a jolt through the group. Lila drove to Boone, meeting Ortiz at the sheriff's office, her heart racing. "Could it be connected?" she asked, her voice tight. Ortiz was cautious, her notepad out as always. "We're looking into it. Same region, same profile, but no evidence yet." The media latched onto the story, reviving hashtag Find Harper for a moment, speculating about a predator in the mountains. Tessa called daily, her nurse's logic piecing together patterns, while Mia updated the blog with a plea for witnesses. The Claire case brought a surge of activity. Search teams swept the new trail, volunteers returned, and Ortiz pulled Harper's file, comparing notes. A tip came in. A gas station clerk remembered a man acting strangely near the Claire trailhead, driving a blue pickup with a dented fender. The detail felt like a lifeline, and Lila clung to it, imagining the same man near Raven's Point. But the lead collapsed. The man was a local mechanic, his alibi solid, his truck accounted for. Claire's case, like Harper's, went cold, her backpack yielding no answers. The connection was never proven, and the renewed attention faded, leaving the women with a fresh layer of grief. It's like losing her all over again, Mia wrote on the blog, her words raw. By the third year, the group's lives had shifted, shaped by absence. Lila had stopped hiking, the mountains too painful. She worked remotely, her designs lackluster, her passion dulled. Tessa was promoted to head nurse, her efficiency a shield against the questions that haunted her. Mia, still teaching, had started therapy, learning to carry her grief without breaking. Ethan moved to Boone, unable to stay away, taking a job at a hardware store and hiking the trails on weekends, calling Harper's name like a prayer. The blog grew quieter, its posts less frequent, but Mia never shut it down. As long as it's up, someone might see something, she told Lila, her voice stubborn with hope. Online, the case lived on in true crime forums, where armchair detectives dissected every detail. Some claimed Harper had staged her disappearance, citing her restless nature. Others pointed to the mountain's history: hikers lost to falls, bears, or foul play. A few threads mentioned a local groundskeeper, a quiet man named Daniel who worked at a nearby campground, his name surfacing in passing on Mia's blog. He'd help with the search, they said, but something about his demeanor, too reserved, too watchful, stuck with one poster. Lila read the thread, her skin prickling, but Ortiz dismissed it as gossip. No evidence, she said, her tone final. Still, Lila wrote the name down, a tiny act of defiance against the silence. The fourth year brought a memorial, organized by Ethan at the trailhead. Locals and hikers gathered, placing flowers near a wooden bench carved with Harper's name. Lila spoke, her voice breaking as she described Harper's love for the mountains, her lens capturing their soul. Tessa stood beside her, stoic, while Mia read a poem, her words carried away by the wind. The bench overlooked the valley, a place Harper would have loved, but its permanence felt like an admission. They might never find her. As the crowd dispersed, Lila lingered, her eyes on the forest. The pines whispered, their branches swaying, and she felt it again, that terrible certainty that the mountains knew more than they'd ever tell. The Blue Ridge Mountains stood silent under a late summer sky, their peaks softened by a haze that clung to the valleys. 5 years had passed since Harper's disappearance, and the trails around Ravens Point had reclaimed their quiet beauty, the orange flags and search grids long gone. The case had settled into the rhythm of a ghost story, whispered about in Boone's diners and hiking forums, a cautionary tale for those who ventured too deep into the woods. Lila, Tessa, and Mia had learned to carry their grief like a second skin, but the ache never dulled. Then, on a humid August morning in 2025, a chance discovery shattered the silence, dragging Harper's name back into the light. The breakthrough came from an unlikely source, a retired biology professor named Ellen Whitaker, 68, who'd moved to Boone to study the region's wildflowers. Ellen was a meticulous woman, her silver hair tied back as she hiked the lesser-known trails, her notebook filled with sketches of Trillium and Lady Slipper. That morning, she'd been exploring a remote clearing a mile from Ravens Point, a spot rarely visited due to its steep descent and thick underbrush. Her border collie, Jasper, bounded ahead, his nose low to the ground, chasing the scent of something buried beneath the ferns. Ellen called him back, but Jasper ignored her, pawing frantically at a patch of earth near a fallen oak. Curious, Ellen approached, her boots sinking into the soft soil. What she found stopped her cold, a flash of fabric, faded but unmistakable, half buried under roots and leaves. It was a gray tank top, tattered and stained, its hem caught on a root as if the forest had tried to swallow it whole. Ellen's heart raced. She'd read about Harper, seen the flyers years ago. The description of her clothing burned into the town's memory. She knelt, careful not to disturb the scene, and noticed something else. A glint of metal, a small silver pendant shaped like a camera, tangled in the fabric. Her hand shook as she dialed 911, her voice steady but urgent. "I think I've found something," she told the dispatcher, her eyes fixed on the cloth. "It might belong to that missing hiker, Harper." Jasper sat beside her, whining softly, as if he understood the weight of the moment. Within hours, the clearing was a hive of activity, a grim echo of the search 5 years earlier. Detective Karen Ortiz arrived first, her notepad out, her face taut with cautious hope. Ranger Tom Bennett followed, his weathered boots navigating the slope with ease. A forensic team cordoned off the area, their white suits stark against the green. Lila, Tessa, and Mia were called to the sheriff's office in Boone, their phones buzzing with the news as they drove from Raleigh and Durham. Lila's hands gripped the steering wheel, her mind racing. "It's her," she whispered, more to herself than to the car's silence. Tessa, in the passenger seat, said nothing, her jaw tight. Mia, in the back, clutched Harper's camera, a habit she'd never broken, her eyes wet with a mix of dread and relief. The forensic team worked methodically, their tools glinting in the dappled light. The tank top was bagged, along with the pendant, which Ethan later confirmed was Harper's, a gift from their mother, worn on every hike. The soil was sifted, revealing fragments of what looked like a leather strap, possibly from a camera bag, and a single hiking boot. Its laces gone, but its sole matching Harper's size. The clearing itself was a puzzle, remote, unmarked, a place no casual hiker would stumble upon. Ortiz noted the fallen oak, its roots exposed like skeletal fingers, and wondered aloud if the recent rains had shifted the earth, exposing what had been hidden for years. "This wasn't meant to be found," she said to Bennett, her voice low. He nodded, his eyes scanning the trees, as if they might still hold answers. Lila, Tessa, and Mia arrived at the sheriff's office, where Ortiz met them with a gentleness she rarely showed. "We've got something," she said, laying out photos of the tank top and pendant on the table. Lila's breath caught. The pendant was unmistakable, its tiny camera shape glinting in the evidence bag. Mia sobbed, her hand over her mouth, while Tessa stared at the photos, her nurse's calm cracking. "Where was it?" she demanded. Ortiz explained. "A clearing off the main trail, a mile from the stream, too far for Harper to have wandered accidentally. The implications hung heavy. Someone had taken her there, or left her things to be buried by time. We're testing for DNA," Ortiz said. "It'll take time, but this is the best lead we've had." The discovery electrified the case. The media descended on Boone, cameras crowding the trailhead, reporters rehashing Harper's story with fresh urgency. The hashtag #FindHarper hashtag roared back to life. Mia's blog flooded with comments from strangers and sleuths alike. Ethan joined the women at the sheriff's office, his face pale but resolute. "She's still out there," he said, his voice breaking. "This means she's close." Lila wanted to believe him, but the sight of the tank top, torn, dirty, abandoned, felt like a wound reopening. She thought of Harper's laugh, her camera flashing at the stream, and wondered what had happened in those missing moments. The forensic team worked through the night, their floodlights casting eerie shadows. They found no human remains, a relief and a frustration, but the soil yielded traces of blood, degraded but testable. Ortiz sent samples to a state lab, prioritizing DNA analysis. She also pulled records from the original search, focusing on anyone who'd been near Ravens Point that day. A name surfaced, one Lila had seen in the forums, Daniel Webb, a groundskeeper at a nearby campground. He'd volunteered during the search, his quiet demeanor noted by a few rangers. Ortiz's team had interviewed him in 2020, but his alibi, working at the campground all day, had checked out. Now, with the new evidence, Ortiz wasn't so sure. He knew the area, she told Bennett. Too well. Lila overheard the name at the sheriff's office, her skin prickling. She remembered Daniel from the search, a lanky man in his 30s, his cap pulled low, always lingering at the edges of the command post. He'd offered water to volunteers, his voice soft, his eyes avoiding hers. She'd thought nothing of it then, but now the memory felt charged, like a puzzle piece clicking into place. Tessa, ever skeptical, pressed Ortiz. Why him? What's the connection? Ortiz was cagey, citing the ongoing investigation, but promised to follow every lead. We're watching him, she said, her tone final. The clearing became the new focal point. Search teams swept the area, K9 units sniffing for more traces, drones mapping the terrain. Volunteers returned, their boots churning the mud, their faces a mix of hope and grim determination. Lila joined them, against Ortiz's advice, her eyes scanning the underbrush for anything. A scrap, a clue, a sign of Harper. The forest was relentless, its beauty a cruel facade, the ferns and pines hiding their secrets still. Tessa and Mia stayed at the command post, sorting through tips flooding Mia's blog. Some wild, some chillingly specific. A hiker claiming to have seen a man near the clearing years ago, carrying a shovel. As days passed, the DNA results loomed like a storm on the horizon. Ortiz shared what she could. The blood on the tank top was human, likely female, but degraded by years of exposure. The pendant and boot were cleaner, offering better chances for a match. Lila clung to the hope of answers, but dread coiled in her gut. What if the DNA confirmed the worst? What if it wasn't Harper's at all? Tessa, practical as ever, focused on logistics, helping organize volunteers, while Mia updated the blog, her posts raw with emotion. We're closer than ever. Please keep Harper in your thoughts. The breakthrough was a lifeline, but it came with a cost. The women barely slept, their days spent at the sheriff's office or the trailhead, their nights haunted by what the clearing might mean. Ethan patrolled with the search teams, his voice hoarse from calling Harper's name, as if she might still answer. The media frenzy grew, speculating about a serial predator, linking Harper's case to Claire's and others unsolved in the region. Ortiz's team dug deeper into Daniel Webb, pulling his work records, interviewing co-workers. He was ordinary on paper, a local who'd lived in Boone his whole life, single, kept to himself. But something about his routine, his knowledge of the trails, nagged at Ortiz. The part ended on a knife's edge. Late one evening, Ortiz called the women to the sheriff's office. Her face was unreadable as she laid out a new photo, a grainy image from a campground security camera, dated the day Harper vanished. It showed a man, cap low, loading something into a blue pickup near the trailhead. The image was blurry, but the truck matched the description from the Claire case. A dented fender, a faded sticker on the tailgate. We're running it through facial recognition, Ortiz said, and we're testing the DNA against a sample from Daniel Webb. Lila's heart pounded, her eyes locked on the photo. Was this the man who'd taken Harper? The forest, silent for so long, was finally speaking, but the truth it held was still shrouded, waiting to be uncovered. The Blue Ridge Mountains loomed under a heavy August sky, their peaks blurred by the heat haze that clung to the valleys. The discovery of Harper's tank top, pendant, and boot in the remote clearing had reignited the case, pulling Lila, Tessa, and Mia back into a whirlwind of hope and dread. 5 years of silence had been shattered, and the sheriff's office in Boone was alive with activity, its fluorescent lights buzzing late into the night. Detective Karen Ortiz, her notepad now a thick stack of notes and photos, was relentless, her team chasing the new lead with a precision that felt like a race against time. The grainy image of the man in the blue pickup, caught on a campground camera the day Harper vanished, hung over the investigation like a specter, and one name kept surfacing, Daniel Webb. Ortiz's team moved fast. The DNA from the tank top's blood was too degraded for a definitive match, but the pendant and boot offered cleaner samples. A rush analysis at the state lab confirmed what Lila had both feared and hoped. The DNA was Harper's. The boot held traces of another profile, male, not in any database, but enough to warrant a warrant for Daniel Webb's DNA. Webb, the unassuming groundskeeper who'd volunteered during the initial search, lived in a small trailer on the edge of Boone, his life a quiet routine of mowing campground lawns and fixing picnic tables. On paper, he was nobody, a 34-year-old loner with no criminal record, no social media, no reason to stand out. But Ortiz's gut, honed by years of chasing shadows, told her otherwise. Surveillance began within days of the DNA results. Ortiz's team tailed Webb discreetly, watching his movements. Morning coffee at a gas station, shifts at the campground, evenings alone at his trailer. He was methodical, almost mechanical, his cap always low, his hands in his pockets. But there were tells, small, unsettling ones. He lingered near the trailheads on his days off, his truck parked at odd angles, as if watching the paths. He avoided eye contact with co-workers, His answers clipped when asked about his past. One ranger, who'd worked with him during the 2020 search, recalled Webb knowing the trails too well, navigating shortcuts no one else used. He was always out there, the ranger told Ortiz, frowning. Said he liked the quiet. Lila, Tessa, and Mia were kept in the loop, though Ortiz was careful with details. At the sheriff's office, Lila studied the surveillance photos, her heart pounding at the sight of Webb's truck, a faded blue Chevy with a dented fender, matching the Claire case tip. Tessa, her nurse's logic kicking in, pressed Ortiz for more. What's his motive? Why Harper? Ortiz's response was measured. We're building a profile. He's not talking yet. Mia, quieter now, spent hours on her blog, sifting through comments for any mention of Webb. One post, buried in a true crime thread, chilled her. A hiker claiming Webb had offered her a ride near Ravens Point in 2019, his eyes lingering too long. Mia forwarded it to Ortiz, her hands shaking. The investigation deepened. Ortiz pulled Webb's work logs from the campground, noting he'd been off duty the morning Harper vanished. His alibi from 2020, working all day, had been loosely corroborated by a co-worker who'd since left town. Ortiz tracked the man down, now in Tennessee, and his memory was hazy. Daniel was around, I think. Didn't keep close tabs. The gap was enough to tighten Ortiz's focus. She ordered a search of Webb's trailer, executed at dawn to catch him off guard. The team found him sitting on a sagging couch, a cup of coffee in hand, his face blank as they presented the warrant. Don't know what you're looking for, he said, his voice flat, but his eyes flicked to a lock shed out back. The search was a revelation, chilling in its ordinariness. The trailer was sparse, unmade bed, dishes in the sink, a radio playing country music. But the shed was different. Inside, Ortiz's team found a box of photos, dozens of them, all women on hiking trails. Some were candid, taken from a distance, a brunette at a stream, a blonde adjusting her backpack. One was Harper, unmistakable, her gray tank top vivid in a shot near Ravens Point. The photo was time-stamped July 17, 2020, hours before she vanished. Lila, shown the image at the sheriff's office, felt her knees buckle. That's her, she whispered, her voice breaking. Tessa gripped her shoulder, her face pale, while Mia stared at the photo, tears streaming down her face. Webb was brought in for questioning. In the interrogation room, he sat hunched, his cap gone, revealing thinning brown hair and a face that seemed to age under the fluorescent lights. Ortiz was relentless, her questions sharp but calm. Why the photos, Daniel? Why Harper? Webb denied everything, his voice steady but his hands twitching. I take pictures. It's a hobby. Don't mean nothing. But the photos told a story Ortiz recognized. Obsession. A predator hiding in plain sight. The team cross-referenced the images with missing persons cases, Claire's among them, and found matches. 3 women, all hikers, all gone within a 50-mile radius over 7 years. Webb's truck placed him near each trailhead. The raid wasn't the end. Ortiz's team dug deeper, pulling phone records, GPS data, anything to tie Webb to the clearing. A co-worker mentioned Webb's habit of scouting remote trails, claiming he was checking for storm damage. A search of his truck turned up a shovel, its blade caked with soil that matched the clearing's composition, rich with clay and pine needles. The evidence was circumstantial but mounting, and Ortiz pushed for a confession. She leaned across the interrogation table, her voice low. We know you were there, Daniel. The DNA's coming back. Tell us where she is. Webb's eyes darted, his fingers drumming, but he stayed silent, his lips a thin line. Lila, Tessa, and Mia waited at the sheriff's office, the hours crawling by. Ethan joined them, his face gaunt from sleepless nights. The women clung to each update, their emotions a tangle of hope and horror. Lila paced, her mind replaying the photo of Harper, the way her smile caught the light. Tessa, ever practical, made lists of questions for Ortiz. Timelines, evidence, next steps. Mia updated the blog, her post raw. We're close to answers, but it hurts to think what they might be. The comments poured in, some supportive, others cruel. accusing the women of chasing ghosts. Lila read them, her anger flaring, but she couldn't look away. The surveillance team caught a break. A gas station camera, 2 miles from Ravens Point, showed Webb's truck the day Harper vanished, pulling in at 11 a.m. He bought a bottle of water, his cap low, but the footage caught his face, blank, unreadable. The timing placed him near the trailhead when Harper disappeared, contradicting his original alibi. Ortiz used it to press harder, showing Webb the footage. "You were there, Daniel. We have you. Where's Harper?" For the first time, his composure cracked, his hands shaking as he muttered, I didn't do anything." But his eyes betrayed him, flicking to the photo of the clearing on the table. The DNA results came in late that night. The male profile on Harper's boot matched Webb's, a 1 in a billion chance of error. Ortiz called the woman to the station, her voice steady but heavy. "It's him," she said, laying out the lab report. Lila felt the air leave her lungs, her vision blurring. Tessa's face hardened, her fists clenched. Mia sobbed, clutching Harper's camera, its weight a reminder of what they'd lost. The evidence was enough to charge Webb with kidnapping and suspicion of murder, but one question burned. Where was Harper? No remains had been found, no confession given. Ortiz promised to keep pushing, but the truth felt tantalizingly out of reach. The arrest was a media storm. News vans lined Boone streets, reporters shouting questions about the Blue Ridge predator. Webb's face, ordinary, forgettable, flashed across screens, his silence fueling speculation. Online, the true crime forums exploded, dissecting his life, his photos, his shed. Lila avoided the coverage, the headlines too raw, but Tessa watched every report, her nurse's precision cataloging inconsistencies. Mia's blog became a focal point, her post shared thousands of times, a plea for anyone who'd seen Webb near the trails. Ethan stood vigil at the trailhead, his eyes on the clearing, as if Harper might still walk out of the woods. The part closed with a tense standoff. Ortiz leaned into Webb, her voice low, relentless. "You took her, Daniel. You know where she is. Give her family peace." Webb stared at the table, his hands cuffed, his face a mask. But as the clock ticked past midnight, he lifted his eyes, meeting Ortiz's. "You don't know these mountains like I do," he said, his voice soft, chilling. "They keep what you give them." The words hung in the air, a confession and a taunt, leaving Ortiz, and the women waiting for answers, on the edge of a truth that was still buried, somewhere in the endless, silent pines. The Blue Ridge Mountains stood resolute under a September sky, their peaks catching the first hints of autumn gold. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and the faint musk of fallen leaves, a quiet reminder of time's relentless march. 5 years and 2 months after Harper's disappearance, the case that had haunted Boone was unraveling, its threads pulled tight by Daniel Webb's arrest. The DNA matched the photos, the shovel in his truck, all pointed to a truth that Lila, Tessa, and Mia had both craved and dreaded. Detective Karen Ortiz's interrogation room was a crucible, and Webb's cryptic words, "The mountains keep what you give them," hung like a challenge, daring her to find the final piece of Harper's story. Ortiz leaned hard on Webb, her questions sharp, her patience fraying. The evidence was overwhelming. Harper's DNA on the boot, the photo of her in his shed, the gas station footage placing him near Ravens Point. But without a body or a confession, the case teetered on the edge of incomplete. Ortiz tried a new tack, her voice low, almost confiding. "You loved these mountains, Daniel. You knew every trail, every cave. You hid her somewhere special, didn't you?" Webb's eyes flicked up, his face pale under the fluorescent lights, but he stayed silent, his fingers tracing invisible patterns on the table. Hours passed, the clock ticking toward dawn, until something in him broke. "There's a place," he said finally, his voice barely a whisper. "Near Blackthorn Ridge. A cave hidden by ferns. I didn't mean for it to go so far." The confession came in fragments, chilling in its detachment. Webb described meeting Harper by chance at the stream, her camera catching his eye as he watched from a distance. He'd been photographing hikers for years, he said, a collection of moments, but Harper's intensity, her focus, drew him in. "She was different," he muttered, his eyes distant. didn't belong out there. He'd followed her, his obsession spiraling, until a moment of impulse, grabbing her arm, a struggle, a fall. He claimed it was an accident, her head striking a rock, but his story shifted, details blurring. What was clear was the aftermath. He'd carried her to a cave near Blackthorn Ridge, a place he'd found as a boy, its entrance concealed by overgrowth. The mountains took her, he said, as if absolving himself. Ortiz pressed for more, her voice steady but cold. Show us. By sunrise, a search team was assembled, guided by Webb's directions. Lila, Tessa, Mia, and Ethan were kept at the sheriff's office, the weight unbearable. Lila paced, her hands shaking, imagining the cave, dark, damp, a tomb for her friend. Tessa sat rigid, her nurses calm, a thin veneer over her anger. Mia clutched Harper's camera, its lens smudged from years of holding, and whispered, "Please, let her be there." Ethan stared out the window, his face etched with 5 years of grief, his hands clenched as if he could will the truth into being. Ortiz called with updates, her voice clipped. The team had found the ridge, the ferns, the cave's narrow mouth. Then a pause and a heavier tone. "We've got something." The cave was a slit in the earth, barely visible behind a curtain of ferns and vines. The forensic team moved carefully, their flashlights cutting through the dark. Inside, the air was cold, thick with the smell of moss and decay. They found her remains in a shallow alcove, bones wrapped in the remnants of a gray tank top, a camera strap tangled among them. The scene was hauntingly serene, the cave's silence a stark contrast to the violence that had brought her there. Ortiz oversaw the recovery, her face grim as the team bagged evidence. A cracked lens, a scrap of fabric, a single hiking boot matching the one from the clearing. The bones were Harper's, confirmed later by dental records, closing the question of her fate with a brutal finality. Webb's confession expanded under pressure. He admitted to 3 other victims, including Claire, their remains hidden in similar remote spots across the Blue Ridge. His motive was a twisted mix of obsession and control, a need to keep the women he photographed, their vitality frozen in his images, and later their graves. He spoke of the mountains as his accomplice, their vastness a shield for his secrets. "No one looks that deep," he said, his voice flat, as if the act was inevitable. Ortiz listened, her notepad filling with details, her disgust buried beneath her professionalism. The confession secured charges, 4 counts of murder, kidnapping, and evidence tampering. Webb's trial loomed, but for the women, justice felt hollow without Harper's voice to affirm it. The recovery hit Lila, Tessa, Mia, and Ethan like a wave. At the sheriff's office, Ortiz broke the news gently, her eyes meeting theirs with rare softness. Lila collapsed into a chair, sobbing, the weight of 5 years crashing down. Tessa's face crumpled, her fists pounding the table, anger and relief warring within her. Mia clung to Ethan, their tears mingling, the camera finally slipping from her hands. "She's not lost anymore," Mia whispered, but the words felt fragile, unable to bridge the gap of loss. Ethan nodded, his voice hoarse. "I just wanted her back." They drove to the trailhead that evening, standing near the bench with Harper's name, the valley stretching below, its beauty now a bittersweet ache. Boone felt the ripple of the resolution. The media swarmed, headlines screaming "Blue Ridge Killer Caught." Webb's face plastered across screens. The town grappled with its new reality. A predator had lived among them, his quiet demeanor a mask. The campground where he'd worked closed temporarily, its owners shaken. Locals organized a safety initiative, installing trail cameras and emergency beacons along popular routes. A memorial service was planned at the church, the same one that had held vigils in 2020. Lila, Tessa, Mia, and Ethan helped plan it, wanting Harper's life, not her death, to be the focus. They chose photos from her camera, sunrises, wildflowers, their own laughing faces, to display, a testament to her eye for beauty. The memorial was held on a crisp September morning, the church packed with hikers, locals, and strangers, touched by Harper's story. Mia spoke, her voice steady despite her tears, reading from her blog. "Harper saw the world in light and shadow, and she taught us to look closer. She's part of these mountains now, but she's also in us. Tessa shared a memory of Harper sneaking coffee to her during a late-night study session, her laugh echoing in the dorm. Lila, last to speak, described their last hike, Harper's awe at Raven's Point, her camera clicking. She loved this place, Lila said, her voice breaking, and it betrayed her. But we found her, because we never stopped looking. Ethan placed a photo of Harper on the altar, her smile bright, her camera around her neck. The service ended with a walk to the trailhead, where the bench overlooked the valley. The group scattered wildflower seeds, Mia's idea, their delicate petals a nod to Harper's sketches. The crowd lingered, sharing stories, their voices mingling with the wind. Ellen Whitaker, the professor whose dog had found the tank top, attended quietly, Jasper at her side. Lila thanked her, their hands clasping briefly, a silent acknowledgement of Chance's role in breaking the case. Jasper knew, Ellen said simply, patting the dog's head. The moment felt fragile, a small victory against the vastness that had hidden Harper for so long. The women returned to the cabin one last time, its A-frame a ghost of their first night together. They sat on the porch, the stars emerging, the mountains silent, but no longer cruel. Tessa lit the fireplace, its warmth a small defiance against the cold. Mia opened Harper's camera, scrolling through its photos one last time before packing it away. Lila unfolded her map, its creases worn, and traced a route to Raven's Point, her fingers stopping at the stream. "We did it," she whispered, not to the map but to Harper, wherever she was now. The forest rustled, its secrets laid bare, and for the first time in 5 years, the women felt a flicker of peace, a bittersweet closure, woven from grief, persistence, and the improbable grace of a dog's instinct in a forgotten clearing.